She saw a silent boy crying alone in her diner at midnight. No parents, no shadow under the lights. When she drew him a picture to comfort him, she didn't know his father, the vampire king, was watching from outside. And he'd been searching for her for 7 years. The coffee pot shattered against the floor at 11:47 p.m. Rin didn't notice. She was staring at booth 7, where a small boy sat completely still, like a photograph someone had pasted into the wrong reality. "Hey, Rin," Marcus called from the kitchen. "You gonna clean that up or just admire your work?" She blinked. Brown liquid spread across white tiles in branching patterns. She'd been holding the pot seconds ago, refilling Mr. Henderson's cup for the 3rd time. Now Mr. Henderson was gone. The diner was empty except for her, Marcus, and the boy who shouldn't be there. When did that kid come in? Rin grabbed the mop, her hands moving on autopilot. What kid? Booth 7. Marcus leaned through the kitchen window, squinting. Place is dead, Rin. You feeling okay? She turned. The boy was still there. Maybe 6 years old, wearing a gray hoodie too big for his frame. His hands rested flat on the table. He hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. Marcus, there's literally a child sitting right. But Marcus had already disappeared back into the kitchen, humming off-key to some song only he could hear. Rin's chest tightened. She'd been pulling double shifts for 2 weeks straight since dropping out of state college. Maybe exhaustion was finally catching up. Maybe she was seeing things. She mopped up the coffee, threw the broken pot in the trash, washed her hands twice. When she looked up, the boy was still there. Okay, not a hallucination then. She approached slowly, the way you might approach a stray dog. Hey there, sweetie. Are you lost? Nothing. His eyes, dark, impossibly dark, stared straight ahead at the salt shaker. Where are your parents? The overhead lights buzzed. Outside, rain hammered against the windows of Evergreen Diner, the only place in this dead-end town that stayed open past midnight. Rin glanced at the glass. Nothing but darkness, and her own reflection staring back.
No. Wait.
There was something else. A shape, tall and dark, standing just beyond the parking lot lights. She blinked, and it was gone. Okay, buddy. Rin slid into the booth across from him, trying to sound calm.
I'm Rin.
Can you tell me your name? Silence. But something changed in his face. A slight tremor in his jaw. His fingers pressed harder against the table. Then she saw it. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Then another. Silent crying, the kind that comes from somewhere too deep for sound. Rin's throat went tight. Oh, sweetheart. It's okay. Whatever happened, we'll figure it out. She reached across the table, and that's when the crayon rolled off the edge. Rin bent to pick it up, red wax, worn down to a nub, and froze. The floor beneath the booth was illuminated by the bright overhead lights. She could see the checkerboard pattern of tiles clearly. She could see the crayon. She could see her own shadow stretching across the floor. But where the boy sat, there was nothing.
No shadow.
No dark silhouette. Just empty, illuminated floor. Her breath caught in her throat. She stayed crouched, staring, waiting for her eyes to adjust or correct or do whatever they needed to do to make sense of this. But the truth didn't change. The boy had no shadow. Rin slowly sat back up, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. The boy was looking at her now, really looking. Those dark eyes held something ancient and sad and completely aware. He knew she'd seen.
It's
okay, she whispered, though nothing about this was okay. I'm not scared. She was lying. She was terrified. But she'd also been the kid everyone overlooked. The foster kid who bounced between homes. The dropout who served coffee to people who didn't see her. She recognized that look in his eyes. Abandonment. Loneliness. The specific kind of invisible that happens when you're surrounded by people who refuse to notice you. Rin grabbed a napkin and pulled a pen from her apron. She drew quickly, a simple circle with rays shooting out. A sun. She slid it across to him. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the boy picked up the red crayon. His hand moved across the napkin with deliberate care. When he turned it around, Rin's stomach dropped. He'd drawn a sun too, but his sun was broken, shattered into pieces. And around it, he'd sketched something that looked like flames. Or maybe reaching hands. What does this mean? Rin asked softly. The boy's hand moved again. This time he drew a simple figure, a stick person. Then he carefully drew a line around it. A circle. A prison. Before Rin could respond, the lights flickered.
Once. Twice.
The temperature dropped so suddenly her breath misted in front of her face. Marcus, she called, but her voice sounded small and far away. The boy's eyes went wide. Not with fear. With recognition. He slid out of the booth, moving for the first time since she'd seen him. His hand shot out and grabbed hers, ice cold, desperate. Through the window, Rin saw it again. The figure.
Closer now.
Standing at the edge of the parking lot, rain falling around it, but somehow never touching it.
Tall.
Impossibly tall. Wearing something that looked like a cloak from another century. And it was staring directly at her. Marcus. Rin's voice cracked. Marcus. What? He appeared in the kitchen window, annoyed. I'm trying to clean. The lights went out. Complete darkness. The kind that shouldn't exist in a diner with emergency backup power. Rin felt the boy's hand tighten around hers. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. A voice.
Deep. Cold. Old.
Thank you for keeping him safe. It came from right behind her. The lights flickered back on. The booth was empty. The boy was gone. The napkin with the broken sun lay on the table, but now there was something else drawn on it. Something she knew she hadn't seen before. A crown. Sketched in that same red crayon. And beneath it, in handwriting too elegant to belong to a child, he remembers you. Rin's hands shook as she picked up the napkin. The front door stood open, rain blowing in. She ran to it, looking out into the parking lot. Nothing. No one. Just her car sitting alone under a broken streetlight, and the rain washing everything away. Rin stood in the doorway, rain soaking through her uniform. The napkin crumpled in her fist felt like evidence of something impossible. Did you see him? She spun toward Marcus. The boy, did you see where he went? Marcus wiped his hands on his apron, frowning. Rin, seriously, are you feeling all right? There hasn't been anyone here for the last hour except old man Henderson, and he left before you dropped that coffee pot. But the booth. Empty all night, Marcus's expression softened. Look, you've been working yourself to death. Why don't you clock out early? I can handle the rest of closing. Rin wanted to argue, to show him the napkin, to prove she wasn't losing her mind. But the look on his face stopped her. That careful concern people use when they think you're breaking down. Maybe she was. Yeah, she heard herself say. Yeah, okay. 20 minutes later, she pushed through the diner's back door into the parking lot. The rain had softened to a drizzle, mist rising from the warm pavement. Her car sat at the far end, underneath the streetlight that had been broken for 3 months. Rin clutched her keys, the napkin still stuffed in her pocket. Every shadow looked wrong, every sound too loud. She was halfway to her car when she saw him. The boy stood beside her driver's door, small and impossibly still. Water dripped from his oversized hoodie, but his face was dry, like the rain refused to touch him. Jesus. Rin's keys clattered to the ground. You scared me half to death. How did you get out here? The boy didn't answer. He simply stared at her with those two dark eyes. Okay, listen, Rin took a breath, trying to sound calm. We need to call someone. The police, or child services, or... That won't be necessary. The voice came from her left. Rin whirled. A man stood beside the dumpster, though she'd heard no footsteps, no movement. He was tall, over 6 feet, wearing a black coat that hung to his knees despite the summer heat. His face was sharp angles and pale skin, with eyes that caught the distant streetlight and reflected it back like an animal's. Who the hell are you? Rin's hand went to her phone. Someone who's grateful for your kindness tonight. His voice was smooth but cold, like velvet over ice. My son can be difficult to manage. Your son? Rin looked at the boy, who hadn't moved. He was sitting alone in a diner at midnight. He hasn't said a single word. And you're just, what? Lurking in parking lots. Family matters are complicated. Yeah? Well, child abandonment is pretty straightforward. Rin pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. The man moved. 1 second, he was by the dumpster. The next, he was directly in front of her, his hand wrapped around her phone. She hadn't seen him cross the distance. Hadn't seen him move at all. I would prefer you didn't. His grip was gentle, but immovable. My son and I value our privacy. Up close, Rin could see details that made her skin crawl. His skin wasn't just pale, it was bloodless. His breath didn't mist in the cool air. And his eyes. There was something fundamentally wrong with his eyes. Let go of me. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. In a moment, he tilted his head, studying her. Tell me, did he draw anything for you? Any pictures? Rin's hand instinctively went to her pocket. The man's gaze followed the movement, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. I see. May I? Headlights swept across the parking lot. A car came screaming around the corner, moving too fast for the slick pavement. It fishtailed, corrected, then accelerated directly toward them. Get down. Rin tried to move, but her body felt sluggish, disconnected. The man's expression changed. The cold politeness vanished, replaced by something primal. Dangerous. Severin, he hissed. He moved like liquid shadow. One arm wrapped around the boy, pulling him close. The other made a gesture in the air. Sharp, deliberate. The world folded. That's the only way Rin could describe it. Reality creased like paper, and suddenly she was staring at darkness. Not the absence of light, but darkness as a physical thing, swirling and alive. The man and boy stood at its center. The man looked back at her one final time. Forget this night, he said. Forget you ever saw us. For your own safety. Then they were gone. Not running. Not hiding.
Just gone.
Dissolved into black mist that evaporated in the rain. The speeding car skidded to a stop where they'd been standing. Doors opened. 2 men got out, both wearing suits too nice for this town, both moving with military precision. One of them looked directly at Rin. His eyes glowed faint gold in the darkness. Where did they go? His voice was accented, clipped. I don't. Where? Rin ran. She grabbed her keys, threw herself into her car, and didn't look back. The engine roared to life. She reversed wildly, nearly hitting a light post, then floored it toward the exit. In her rearview mirror, the 2 men didn't follow. They simply stood in the rain, watching her go. One of them pulled out a phone. She saw his lips move, though she couldn't hear the words. Then they climbed back into their car and drove away in the opposite direction. Rin didn't stop shaking until she was 5 miles down the highway, her apartment complex finally visible through the rain-streaked windshield. She pulled into her parking spot and sat there, engine running, trying to convince herself she'd imagined everything. But when she finally checked her pocket, the napkin was still there. And the message had changed. Below the crown and the elegant script, a new line had appeared in fresh red crayon. They're hunting him. Rin didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table until dawn, staring at the napkin under the harsh fluorescent light. The message hadn't changed again. They're hunting him. The words looked like they'd been written by a child's hand, but she'd watched that napkin. No one had touched it after she'd left the parking lot. At 8 a.m., she drove to the police station. The building squatted on Main Street like a tired dog, all brick and barred windows. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork. A desk sergeant looked up from his computer with the expression of someone who'd already had a long day. Help you. I need to report a missing child. Rin placed the napkin on the counter. Last night, around midnight. A boy, maybe 6 years old, gray hoodie. Slow down, the sergeant pulled out a form. Name? I don't know. He wouldn't talk. Parents' names? There was a man. Tall, black coat. He said the boy was his son, but something was wrong. Really wrong. The sergeant's pen stopped moving. Wrong how? Rin hesitated. The boy had no shadow. Men with glowing eyes chased them. They vanished into black mist. He left a young child alone in a diner at midnight, she said instead. Then these men showed up in a car and… Did they threaten you? Not exactly. But they were looking for the boy. And the way they moved, she trailed off, hearing how it sounded. The sergeant typed something into his computer. Waited.
Frowned.
No missing persons reports filed in the last 48 hours.
No Amber Alerts.
No complaints about abandoned children. He looked at her carefully. You get a license plate? Any identifying information? It happened too fast. Description of the child. Dark hair. Dark eyes. Gray hoodie with. Rin stopped. She couldn't actually remember any other details. Had there been logos on his clothes? What color were his shoes? The image in her mind was already fuzzing at the edges. Miss, I understand you're concerned, but without concrete information, there's not much we can do. Kids sometimes wander. Parents sometimes make questionable choices. If there's no report filed, no witnesses, no evidence of a crime. I'm a witness. Of what, exactly? A kid sitting in a booth and a man picking him up? The sergeant's tone wasn't unkind, just tired. That's not illegal. Rin picked up the napkin. The drawings suddenly looked like exactly what they were, crayon scribbles that could mean anything or nothing. Look, the sergeant continued, if you see the kid again, call us immediately. We'll send someone. But right now, I got 3 domestic disturbances, 2 break-ins, and a dog loose on Highway 9. Unless you got something more concrete. Rin left. Her apartment felt wrong when she got back. Not dangerous, just off, like furniture moved an inch in every direction. She checked the windows.
Locked. The door. Locked.
Everything exactly as she'd left it. She tossed her keys on the counter and headed for the bedroom, desperate for a few hours of sleep before her next shift. That's when she saw it. The napkin. Sitting on her bed. The same napkin she'd just brought to the police station. The same napkin that should be in her pocket right now. Rin's hand flew to her jeans. Empty. She approached the bed slowly, her heart hammering. Maybe she dropped it. Maybe she'd never actually taken it with her. Maybe. The drawings were different. The broken sun was still there.
The crown.
But now there were symbols around the border. Strange, angular marks that hurt to look at too long. They seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. And in the center, a new drawing. 2 figures. One small, one tall. Both holding hands. Behind them, something that might have been a building or a mountain. And around them, drawn in frantic, desperate strokes, flames. Rin picked up the napkin with shaking hands. The paper felt warm. Then she saw something else. Something that made her stomach drop. One of the symbols. The angular mark in the bottom corner. She knew it. She ran to her closet, dragging out the cardboard box she never opened. The one with her childhood things. The few items she'd had when Mrs. Patterson found her wandering Route 12 at age 11, confused and alone, with no memory of where she'd come from. There. Her old sketchbook. Rin flipped through pages of crude childhood drawings.
Cats.
Houses. Stick figure families she'd never had. And there on page 17, the same symbol, drawn over and over in purple crayon, filling an entire page. 11-year-old Rin had written beneath it, "This means home." She had no memory of drawing it. No memory of why that symbol meant anything at all. But now, staring at the napkin, at the symbol she'd drawn 15 years ago, something stirred in the back of her mind. Not a memory. More like the ghost of a memory. A garden. Stone walls. Someone laughing. You have to remember the symbol, Rin. No matter what happens, remember how to come back. A boy's voice. Young.
Urgent.
The memory, if it was even real, slipped away like water through her fingers. Rin sat on her bed, surrounded by impossible drawings and forgotten symbols, and asked the empty apartment, "Who are you? And why do you think I remember?" Outside, the sun climbed higher. But in the corner of her bedroom, where the light didn't quite reach, a shadow moved. Not her shadow. A small one. Watching. Rin didn't go to work that night. She called in sick for the first time in 8 months, ignoring Marcus's concerned questions. Then she sat on her couch with every light in the apartment blazing, the napkin and her childhood sketchbook spread across the coffee table. The symbols matched perfectly. Whatever she'd known at age 11, whatever she'd forgotten, it was connected to that boy. At 9 p.m., she ordered pizza. At 10 p.m., she gave up trying to make sense of anything. At 11 p.m., she finally admitted she was exhausted enough to sleep. She was brushing her teeth when she heard it.
Top, 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 soft.
Deliberate. Coming from her bedroom. Rin froze, toothbrush halfway to her mouth. Her apartment was on the 4th floor. Nothing should be tapping on her bedroom window.
Top, top, top.
She grabbed the baseball bat she kept by the front door, a gift from her last foster father, given with the words, "Trust no one," and crept toward her bedroom. The tapping stopped. Rin reached the doorway, bat raised. Through the window, she could see the fire escape, slick with rain. Empty. She lowered the bat, releasing a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Then she saw the handprint. Small. Child-sized. Pressed against the glass from the outside. And beneath it, another. And another. Like someone had been climbing up the fire escape, leaving wet prints on every surface.
Top, 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 rinspoon.
The sound came from her left now. The living room window. She ran back, bat gripped tight, and yanked open the curtains. The boy stood on her fire escape, completely drenched, water streaming from his gray hoodie. His dark eyes stared at her through the glass with desperate intensity. In his hands, he held a sketchbook, pressing it against the window. For a moment, Rin couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the boy's hand moved. He gestured urgently. "Open it. Please, open it." "This is insane," Rin whispered. But she unlocked the window. Cold air rushed in as she slid it open. The boy climbed through with careful movements, water pooling on her floor. He didn't make a sound, not even the wet squelch of soaked shoes. Up close, Rin could see he was shivering. But his skin felt room temperature when she touched his shoulder, not cold, not warm, like touching plastic. "You need to tell me what's happening," Rin said. "I can't help if I don't understand." The boy opened his sketchbook to a blank page. His hand moved quickly, sketching with the pencil he pulled from his hoodie pocket. First, he drew 2 figures. One small, clearly him. One taller, Rin, her waitress apron carefully detailed. Then he drew them standing together, holding hands. Next page. The same 2 figures, but now they stood in front of something large. Castle-like, with towers and high walls. Around them, he drew flames. Not decorative, aggressive, violent strokes that nearly tore the paper. "You're in danger," Rin said. It wasn't a question. The boy nodded. His hand flew across another page. This time he drew multiple figures approaching. Stick people, but menacing. And above them, he drew a symbol that made Rin's skin crawl. A circle with a slash through it. A target. A mark. "Those men from the parking lot. They're after you." Another nod. The boy flipped pages frantically, showing her more drawings. Some looked recent, sketched in the last few hours. Others were older, the paper worn. One made Rin's chest tighten. It showed 2 children playing in a garden. Behind them, stone walls and flowering trees. The style was cruder, drawn by a younger hand. But one child was clearly the boy. And the other. "Is that supposed to be me?" Rin pointed. The boy's finger traced something written at the bottom of the page. Not words. The symbol. The one from her childhood sketchbook. Home. "I don't remember this," Rin said, but even as she spoke, that ghost memory stirred again. Stone walls. Laughter. Purple flowers she'd never seen in any garden since. The boy wrote something on a new page, his hand shaking. "You promised." Promised what? He underlined it 3 times. Then drew an arrow pointing to the castle. To the garden. To the 2 children. "You promised." Before Rin could respond, The boy's head snapped toward the window. His eyes went wide, not with fear, but with recognition.
Warning.
Rin heard it then. Footsteps on the fire escape. Multiple sets. Moving fast. Get back, she hissed, grabbing the boy and pulling him toward the hallway. The living room window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across her floor as two figures crashed through. They wore dark tactical gear, faces covered by masks. But their eyes glowed gold in the darkness. Target acquired. One said into a radio. The other raised his hand. Something glinted in his palm, a knife?
No.
The blade pulsed with light, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Surrender the prince, and we'll let you live. Prince. Rin's mind reeled. The boy squeezed her hand. His grip was ice-cold now, trembling. Desperate. Then the shadows in her hallway moved. They didn't just shift, they rose, spiraling upward like black water. The temperature dropped so fast Rin's breath misted. The lights flickered and died. In the darkness, she felt the boy pull her close. His other hand reached out, touching the living shadow. The world folded. Rin's stomach lurched. Reality twisted. She felt like she was falling and flying simultaneously, surrounded by cold darkness that pressed against her skin like silk. Then it stopped. They were standing in an alley. Rain poured around them. In the distance, Rin could see the lights of the industrial district, the abandoned railway yard where the city dumped old train cars to rust. They were 3 miles from her apartment. The boy collapsed. Rin caught him, feeling how light he was. Too light, like he was made of paper and air. "What did you do?" she whispered. But the boy didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He'd already passed out, his skin gray, his breathing shallow. And in the distance, Rin heard the sound of engines. They were still being hunted. The boy weighed almost nothing in Rin's arms. She ran through the railway yard, her shoes splashing through oily puddles. Rusted train cars loomed on either side like the rib cages of metal giants. The rain came down harder, turning the ground to mud. Behind her, the engine's sounds grew louder. "Come on, kid. Stay with me." Rin ducked behind a derailed boxcar, pressing her back against the cold metal. The boy's head lolled against her shoulder. His lips were gray. Headlights swept across the yard. Not one vehicle. 3. They spread out in formation, spotlights cutting through the rain like prison searchlights. Rin heard doors opening. Footsteps. Voices calling to each other in a language she didn't recognize. Thermals picking up 2 signatures. Sections 7-inch. Copy. Moving to intercept. Rin's heart hammered. She looked down at the boy. Still unconscious. Whatever he'd done to transport them here had drained him completely. She had to move. Clutching him closer, Rin ran deeper into the yard. The old railway office building stood at the far end, a 3-story brick structure with most of its windows broken out. If she could get inside, find a place to hide. A spotlight locked onto her. "Stop. Hands where we can see them." Rin didn't stop. She ran harder, legs burning. The boy's weight somehow getting heavier with each step. Something whistled past her ear. She glanced back and saw one of the men pointing what looked like a gun, but the barrel glowed with the same sick light as the knife from her apartment. When he fired again, the projectile left a trail of golden sparks. It hit the ground 3 feet to her left. The mud hissed and burned.
Jesus Christ, ringasped.
She reached the office building and kicked through a rotted door. Inside was darkness and the smell of mold. She could hear water dripping somewhere and the scurry of rats in the walls. The boy stirred in her arms. His eyes fluttered open. "Hey," Rin whispered. "I need you to wake up. We need to move again."
Can you do that thing?
The boy shook his head weakly. He raised one hand, trying to gesture, but his fingers trembled. He couldn't do it again.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, we hide then. Rin climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The wood groaned under her weight, half-rotten and dangerous. She found an old office with a desk still intact and crawled underneath it, pulling the boy close. Outside, She heard the pursuers enter the building. Ground floor clear. Check upstairs. If you find them, take the boy alive. The girl is expendable. Rin's blood went cold. She looked down at the boy, who stared back at her with those ancient, knowing eyes. He placed one small hand over her mouth. Be quiet. Be completely quiet. Footsteps on the stairs.
Slow.
Methodical. Through a gap in the desk, Rin watched boots appear in the doorway. Black tactical gear, but the fabric shimmered with the same runic symbols she'd seen on the weapons. Thermal signature was here, the man said. Recent. Another set of boots joined him. This one held a device that beeped softly. The prince is close. I can feel the shadow magic. It's weak though. He exhausted himself.
Good.
Makes him easier to take. They moved through the room. One of them kicked over a filing cabinet. The crash made Rin flinch. The boy's hand tightened on hers. Then she felt it. A warmth spreading from his palm into hers. Not physical heat, something else. Like electricity, or the feeling right before a thunderstorm. The shadows under the desk deepened, grew thicker. The boy was doing something, gathering what little strength he had left. One of the men stopped directly in front of the desk.
Hey.
You hear that? Hear what? Breathing. I heard. The shadows exploded outward. They moved like living things, tentacles of darkness that wrapped around the men's legs. The pursuers shouted, firing their weapons, but the light passed through the shadows like water. Move! Rin grabbed the boy and ran. They burst through a window onto a rusted fire escape. The metal shrieked under their weight. Behind them, more shouts. More footsteps. Her ankle throbbed. The boy slumped against her, barely conscious. They were trapped. Then she felt it. A presence. Cold and vast and familiar. The temperature in the train car dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Outside, one of the pursuers shouted, I found something. The old red car, Sector 9. The man's expression hardened. He looked at Rin. The sensation of shadow walking was worse this time, like being turned inside out. Varos remained standing, perfectly composed. He carried Alan with one arm, the boy's head resting against his shoulder. The disorientation will pass, Varos said flatly. Your human body isn't designed for shadow travel. No shit, Rin fought down nausea. What the hell was that? Where are we? 2 miles north. They won't find us here. I've masked our presence. Varos laid Alan gently on an old sofa that looked like it had been placed there recently. The boy's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Rin struggled to her feet, bracing herself against the wall. Now that the immediate danger had passed, fury replaced fear. Start talking.
Now.
What's happening to him? Why can't he speak? Why doesn't he have a... She stopped, the word catching in her throat. Shadow. Why doesn't he have a shadow? Varos finished. His pale eyes fixed on her. Because it was stolen. Along with his voice. And soon, if I cannot break the curse, his soul will follow. The words hung in the air like smoke. Curse, Rin repeated numbly. My son is Prince Alan, heir to the Shadowlands throne. 3 months ago, he was cursed by someone close to my court. Someone I trusted. Varos's voice remained level, but Rin heard the rage underneath. The curse strips away parts of him piece by piece. First his voice, then his shadow, and finally, his very existence will be consumed. Rin looked at the boy, at Alan.
Why?
Who would do that to a child? Someone who wants the throne. Someone who believes a child makes me weak. Varos moved to the window, staring out at the rain. The Shadowlands have been in turmoil since my wife's death. Factions rise and fall. Assassins lurk in every corner. I brought Alan here, to the human world, to hide him from those who would finish what the curse started. And those men hunting us. Mercenaries. Hired by whoever orchestrated this. Varos turned back. They want to capture Alan before the curse completes. A prince, even a cursed one, has value. Political leverage. Or perhaps they simply want to ensure the curse finishes its work. Rin's mind reeled. Vampires. Curses. Shadow kingdoms. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem was whether she could afford rent. Why come to me, she asked. Why my diner?
Why?
I didn't choose your diner, Varos looked at Alan. He did. The boy stirred on the couch, his eyes opening slightly. For 3 weeks, I've kept him hidden across 6 different cities. He remained docile, obedient. Then 2 nights ago, he became agitated.
Desperate.
He drew pictures constantly, a diner, a waitress. Varos's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I finally brought him to that town, to that restaurant, because he wouldn't rest until I did. But I don't know him, Rin protested. I've never seen him before in my life. Are you certain? The question hit like a punch. Rin thought about the symbol. The drawings from her childhood. That ghost memory of stone walls and purple flowers. The year you were found wandering Route 12 with no memories, Varos said quietly. You were 11 years old. Alan was 4. The same year the portals between realms were sealed after the war. What are you saying? Children of both worlds once formed bonds. Friendships that crossed realms through the old gates. When the war came, thousands were separated. Many humans who traveled to our world had their memories altered before being returned, for their own protection. Rin's knees felt weak. You're saying I knew him? Before. He certainly knew you. And despite the memory alteration, despite years apart, despite a curse that should have consumed every piece of his identity, Varos looked at his son with something that might have been pride. He remembered you. Alan sat up slowly. He reached for the sketchbook he dropped when they arrived. With trembling hands, he flipped to a page and held it up. The drawing showed 2 children in a garden, but this version was more detailed than before. The girl wore a dress with flowers. The boy had a crown of leaves in his hair. They were holding hands, laughing. At the bottom, in careful letters, my best friend Ariane. Tears burned Rin's eyes. She didn't remember, couldn't remember, but something in her chest recognized the truth of it. Why can't he speak? Her voice cracked. Why did the curse take his voice first? Because voices hold power in my world. Names. Words. Speech. Varos's jaw tightened. The curse is designed to unmake him piece by piece. Voice, shadow, soul. Each piece stolen feeds whoever cast the curse, making them stronger. Can it be broken? I don't know. I've consulted 12 witches, foreseers, and an oracle who hasn't spoken in 300 years. None could identify the curse's origin. Varos looked at Rin with something that might have been desperation. But Alan believes you're the key. He came back to you for a reason. Rin moved to the couch and knelt beside Alan. The boy's dark eyes met hers. Up close, she could see how exhausted he was. How much pain he carried. I don't remember, she whispered.
I'm sorry.
I don't remember our friendship, or your world, or any of it. Alan's hand reached out. He touched her temple gently. Then he touched his own chest, over his heart. The meaning was clear. You don't have to remember with your mind. Your heart knows. Those men will keep coming, Varos said. And they're not the only ones. I've evaded 7 attempts on Alan's life in 3 months. Eventually, our luck will run out. Then what do? Varos's expression hardened with determination. We stop running. We find who cast this curse and we end them, he looked at Rin. But I cannot do it alone. Alan won't leave your side. And perhaps that's for the best. Perhaps you're meant to be part of this. I'm a waitress from nowhere. I don't know anything about magic or curses, or... You survived tonight. You protected my son, without hesitation. You ran when others would have frozen. Varos extended his hand. That makes you braver than half my court. Rin looked at Alan. The boy nodded, hope shining in his dark eyes. She was insane. This was insane. But that symbol in her childhood sketchbook. The drawings. The fragments of something forgotten. Okay, Rin heard herself say. I'm in. What's our next move? Varos's smile was sharp and dangerous. We find a witch who can read curses. And we discover who wants my son dead. The bus station smelled like diesel and stale coffee. Rin sat in the back row of a greyhound heading south, watching the pre-dawn landscape blur past the window. Alan slept against her shoulder, his small body finally relaxed. Varro sat across the aisle, hood pulled low, avoiding the handful of other passengers who'd boarded for the 5 a.m. route. "Won't they track us?" Rin whispered. "Not here. Buses move through too many jurisdictions too quickly." The mercenaries rely on stationary surveillance. Varros's eyes glowed faintly in the darkness of his hood. "We have perhaps 12 hours before they recalibrate their search. 12 hours to find answers. 12 hours before more people with glowing weapons came hunting." Rin looked down at Alan. In sleep, he looked even younger than 6. Fragile. His hand rested on the sketchbook he refused to let go of. "How long has he been silent?" she asked. 63 days. The curse took his voice on the night of the autumn equinox. Varros's jaw tightened. "I woke to him screaming, except no sound came out. Just silence. He hasn't spoken since." And his shadow. 30 days ago. It simply
dissolved.
Like smoke. Rin tried to imagine it. Watching her child lose pieces of themselves, unable to stop it. How long until? Until his soul is consumed? The oracle said the curse completes at the winter solstice. 21 days from now. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to save him. The bus hit a pothole. Alan stirred, his eyes opening. When he saw Rin, relief washed over his face. He sat up and immediately reached for his sketchbook. "Morning," Rin said softly. "We're safe." Still moving.
Aline nodded.
He began drawing, his hand moving with practiced ease. Rin watched the image take shape, 2 figures on a bus, just like now. But behind them, through the window, he drew something else. A castle with high towers. Mountains. A sky filled with stars that seemed wrong somehow. Too many. Too bright. "Is that your home?" Rin asked.
Aline nodded.
He flipped to a new page and drew more. A garden with strange trees that had purple flowers. Stone pathways. A fountain shaped like a crescent moon. And 2 children. Running. Playing. Laughing. He pointed to the smaller figure, then to himself. Then to the other figure and to Rin. "We played together there," Rin said. It wasn't a question anymore.
Aline nodded enthusiastically.
He drew more, the 2 of them climbing trees, hiding behind statues, drawing on the stone paths with colored chalk. Then his hand slowed. The next drawing was darker. It showed a massive gate, ornate and tall. On one side stood the boy with a crown. On the other side, the girl, older now, maybe 10 or 11. They were reaching for each other through the gate. But the gate was closing. "The war," Varro said quietly. "When the portal sealed, children from both sides were sent home. Your memories were altered to protect you from the trauma. A kindness, the human authorities called it. Kindness." Rin's voice hardened. "They took away years of my life. Years of friendship. Would you have preferred to remember what you'd lost? To grow up knowing an entire world existed that you could never return to?" Rin didn't have an answer for that. Alan drew more, faster now, as if desperate to show her everything. Page after page of memories. The 2 of them in the palace library, surrounded by books that glowed. Teaching each other games, human games and Shadow Realm games. Drawing pictures together, just like they were now. One drawing made Rin's breath catch. It showed the girl giving the boy something. A necklace?
No.
A bracelet. Simple, braided from colored thread. "I made that." Rin touched the page.
Aline nodded.
He pulled back his sleeve. Around his wrist, worn and faded but still intact, was a bracelet. Red, blue, and purple thread braided together. The colors had faded to pastels, the thread frayed at the edges. But he'd kept it. For 7 years, through everything, he'd kept it. "Oh my God," Rin whispered. Her eyes burned with tears. "You really did remember me." Alan's hand trembled as he wrote on a fresh page. "You made me promise, Tio, remember. You said no matter what, we'd find each other again." "I said that."
Aline nodded.
He drew one more picture. Two children standing at the closing gate. The girl was crying. The boy was crying, but they were holding hands through the narrowing gap. And beneath it, in careful letters, "I'm sorry I took so long." Rin couldn't hold back anymore. She pulled Alan into a hug, feeling how small he was, how vulnerable. "You found me. That's what matters." Against her shoulder, she felt Alan shaking. Silent crying, the kind that came from too much held inside for too long. "The bond between you is stronger than anyone anticipated," Varro said. His voice was softer than before. "Perhaps strong enough to break the curse. If we can find its source." The bus rolled into a rest stop. Other passengers stirred, preparing to disembark for the 15-minute break. "Where exactly are we going?" Rin asked. "New Corn City. There's a district the humans ignore, a place where supernatural beings trade and hide. If anyone can identify this curse, it's the witch who runs the night market." "And you trust her?" Varos's smile was grim. "Trust?
No.
But she owes me a debt. One she cannot refuse to repay." The bus doors hissed open. Passengers filed out toward the fluorescent-lit convenience store. Rin looked at Alan, who had finally stopped crying. He met her eyes and managed a small smile. Then he drew one more thing, quick, simple. A heart. And an arrow pointing from him to her. "Yeah, kid," Rin said, voice thick. "Me too." Outside, the sun began to rise. In the distance, Rin could see the skyline of New Corn City growing larger on the horizon. Somewhere in that city was a witch who could read curses. Somewhere was the answer to who had done this to Alan. And somewhere, Rin hoped, was a way to save him. New Corn City rose from the plains like a steel forest, all glass towers and concrete. But Varos didn't lead them toward the gleaming downtown. Instead, they walked east, into the industrial quarter, where the buildings sagged and graffiti covered every surface. "Stay close," Varos said. "The district exists in the spaces between. Humans pass through it daily, without ever seeing it." "How does that work?" Rin asked, keeping Alan's hand firmly in hers. "Perception filters. Old magic woven into the architecture. Your mind wants to skip over it, to see only what makes sense." Varos stopped at an alley that looked like every other alley. Dumpsters, broken bottles, a stray cat watching from a fire escape. "But you're with me now. You'll see through it." He stepped forward. The air shimmered like heat waves on asphalt. For a moment, Rin's vision doubled. She saw both the grimy alley and something else underneath. Something older. Then Varos passed through the shimmer, and the illusion shattered. The alley transformed. The brick walls were covered in symbols that glowed faint silver. The dumpsters were gone, replaced by vendor stalls selling things that made Rin's eyes hurt. Bottles of colored smoke, flowers that sang, books whose pages turned themselves. And the people. Not people. Things that looked almost human but weren't. A woman with moth wings folded against her back. A man whose skin rippled like water. A child, or something child-shaped, leading 3 dogs with too many eyes. "Welcome to the night market," Varos said. "Try not to stare." Rin pulled Alan closer. The boy looked around with wide eyes but no fear. This was his world. He belonged here in a way Rin never could. They moved deeper into the market. Vendors called out in languages Rin didn't understand. Somewhere, someone played an instrument that sounded like wind chimes and thunder combined. The air smelled like cinnamon and ozone. There, Varos pointed to a shop at the end of the alley. Unlike the open stalls, this was a proper building. Narrow, 3 stories tall, squeezed between 2 warehouses. The door was painted deep purple, and above it hung a sign. "Morel's Oddities and Truths." "She's dramatic," Varos muttered. "Be respectful. She's powerful enough to be dangerous." The shop interior was cluttered with precisely organized chaos. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, holding jars of things Rin couldn't identify. Crystals that pulsed with inner light. Dried plants that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. A taxidermied raven that definitely turned its head to watch them enter. "Varos," the voice came from behind a beaded curtain. I wondered when you'd come crawling back. A woman emerged. She was short, maybe 5 feet tall, with deep brown skin and silver hair that defied gravity, floating around her head like she was underwater. Her eyes were solid white, no pupils, no iris, just white that somehow still managed to look directly at each of them in turn. Morel Varos inclined his head. I'm calling in my debt. Of course you are. Morel's smile was sharp. And you brought interesting company, her gaze fixed on Alan. Oh, child. What's been done to you? Alan stepped forward before Rin could stop him. He held out his sketchbook, open to a page covered in the strange symbols from the napkin. Morel took it with careful hands. Her expression shifted from curious to concerned to outright alarmed. Where did you get these? She demanded. Alan pointed to himself, then drew a quick sketch, the symbols appearing on his skin, burning. The curse manifests through them, Varos explained. Every morning, new marks appear. Each one takes something from him. Morel set the sketchbook down and approached Alan. May I? When he nodded, she placed her hands on either side of his head, her white eyes closing. The air grew thick. Rin felt pressure building like right before a storm. The jars on the shelves began to rattle. Then Morel gasped and stumbled backward. This isn't a killing curse, she said, voice shaking. It's a harvesting curse. What's the difference? Rin asked. A killing curse destroys. This 1-inch. Morel looked at Varos with something like pity. This one is stealing his essence piece by piece to fuel a transformation. Someone is consuming your son's shadow and voice to gain his powers. Who? Varos's voice could have frozen blood. I can't see the caster. They've hidden themselves well. But Morel picked up the sketchbook again, studying the symbols. This isn't random vampire magic. These are royal binding runes. Only someone with access to the deepest vaults of shadow magic could cast this. Someone in my court, Varos said flatly. Someone very close to you. Someone who would benefit from Alan's death and his power. Morel traced one of the symbols. There's something else. The curse is anchored to a bloodline tie. She turned to Rin. It's connected to you. What? Rin stepped back. That's impossible. I just found out vampires existed yesterday. Not connected directly. Connected to your lineage. Morel's white eyes seemed to see through her. You're not fully human, girl. Somewhere in your ancestry, there's shadow realm blood. Diluted, nearly dormant, but there. The room spun. I'm just a waitress.
I'm nobody.
Your blood is why Alan trusts you. Why he remembered you when he shouldn't remember anything. Morel looked at Varos. The curse was designed with her bloodline in mind. Whoever cast it knew about her connection to the prince. They're using that bond. Using it how? Varos demanded. Morel hesitated. The curse won't complete unless Alan is near her when the final phase activates. They need her presence to fully harvest his soul. She's the anchor. Rin felt like she'd been punched. So I'm helping kill him? No. Alan's hand grabbed hers. He shook his head violently, writing in his book, You're keeping Emmy alive. The boy's right, Morel said. The curse assumes your bond is weak. That you don't care. That you'll abandon him when things get dangerous, she smiled grimly. But you haven't. Your presence is actually slowing the curse's progress. Your genuine care is disrupting the formula. Then she stays with him, Varos said. Constantly. That'll buy time. But it won't break the curse. Morel pulled a crystal orb from a shelf. Inside, something dark swirled. You need to find the caster. Force them to reverse it. Or kill them. Death breaks most curses. How do we find them? Morel held up the sketchbook. These symbols form a pattern.
A signature.
I can't tell you who cast it, but I can tell you where they'll be when the curse completes. She waved her hand over the orb. The darkness inside cleared, showing an image, a massive cathedral, abandoned, its windows shattered. The Cathedral of St. Erasmus. 3 miles outside the city, Morel's expression darkened. Whoever cast this will be there on the solstice to complete the ritual. It's written into the curse structure. Then we set a trap, Varos said. You walk into one, you mean Morel closed the orb? They'll be expecting you. This whole thing reeks of betrayal, Varos.
Someone who knows how you think.
How you fight. Varos's face was stone. Then I'll surprise them. Morel looked at Rin. You're sure you want this fight, girl? You could walk away. Live your normal life. Rin looked at Alan, who stared up at her with desperate hope. She thought about the bracelet on his wrist. The promise she'd made as a child, even if she couldn't remember making it. I'm not leaving him, she said firmly. Good. Morel pulled 3 amulets from a drawer. Wear these. They'll hide you, from scrying until the solstice. After that, she shrugged. After that, either you break the curse or the boy dies. She handed them each an amulet. They were simple, black stones on leather cords. As Rin put hers on, Morel leaned close and whispered, Trust your instincts when the time comes. Your blood remembers even if you don't. Outside, the market continued its strange commerce, unaware that in 20 days, a final confrontation would determine if a prince lived or died. They spent 19 days preparing. Varos taught Rin how to fight, basic moves that might keep her alive for 30 seconds against supernatural opponents. Alan drew maps of the cathedral, showing entrances and hiding spots. They moved constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice, the amulets keeping them hidden from magical surveillance. But they couldn't hide from everything. On the 20th day, as they scouted the cathedral from a distance, Varos received a message. A black envelope that simply appeared on the motel dresser, sealed with a familiar crest. It's from Severin, Varos said, studying the letter. My general. The one I left in charge of the Shadowlands. What does it say? Rin asked. He's found the traitor. Says he has proof. He wants to meet us at the cathedral tonight to help end this. Varos's jaw tightened. He's bringing soldiers loyal to the crown. That's good, right? Rin looked at Alan, who was drawing at the small table. More people on our side. Severin has served my family for 200 years. If anyone could be trusted, but Varos's voice carried doubt. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone anymore. Varos crumpled the letter. But we need allies. If he truly has found the caster, this ends tonight. The Cathedral of St. Erasmus loomed against the winter sky like a rotted tooth. Its Gothic spires had partially collapsed, and ivy crawled up the stone walls like grasping fingers. The front doors hung open, broken hinges creaking in the wind. They arrived at midnight. Varos went first, his hand on the sword hidden beneath his coat. Rin followed, holding Alan's hand. The boy was tense, his eyes darting to every shadow. Inside, moonlight streamed through broken stained glass, painting colored patterns on the debris-covered floor. The pews had been pushed aside, creating an open space in the center of the nave. And there, waiting beside the altar, stood a man in silver armor. He was tall, nearly as tall as Varos, with sharp features and silver hair pulled back in a tight knot. His armor bore the same crest as the letter, a crescent moon pierced by a sword. My king, Severin bowed deeply. Thank you for trusting me. Where are your soldiers? Varos asked, his voice carefully neutral. Surrounding the perimeter. I didn't want to spook you with a show of force. Severin's gaze fell on Alan. Prince Alan.
You've grown so much despite
everything. Alan didn't react. He stepped slightly behind Rin. You said you found the traitor, Varos pressed. Who? Someone who's been planning this for years. Someone patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, Severin smiled. Someone who realized that a vampire king weakened by grief over his dead wife and distracted by his cursed son would be easy to overthrow. The temperature dropped. Rin saw it in Varos's eyes, the moment he understood. You. Varos breathed. Me, Severin's smile widened. Did you really think I'd serve you forever? Watching you make weak decisions, coddling the boy, mourning your human-loving wife. He gestured, and figures emerged from behind the pillars. Not soldiers. Mercenaries. At least 20 of them, all armed with those runic weapons. The curse was brilliant, wasn't it? Severin continued. Slow enough that you'd waste time searching for answers. Specific enough that you'd need the girl. He looked at Rin. Your bloodline was the key. Shadow realm ancestry just strong enough to anchor the spell, human enough that you'd be ignored as a threat. You're the one harvesting Alan's powers, Rin said, horror dawning. Shadow walking in daylight. That's what I'll gain when the curse completes. Your son's ability to move through shadows without the sun's weakness. Severin's eyes gleamed. A vampire who can hunt at any hour. A king who can truly rule both realms. You'll never complete it, Varos snarled. He moved impossibly fast, drawing his sword. But Severin was ready. He raised his hand, and silver chains erupted from the floor. They wrapped around Varos's legs, his arms, burning where they touched. Varos screamed, actual pain. The first time Rin had heard him make such a sound. Silver blessed by shadow witches, Severin explained. The one metal that can hold a vampire king. Run! Varos roared at Rin. But mercenaries were already moving. Two grabbed Rin, yanking her away from Alan. The boy tried to fight, shadows spiraling from his hands, but he was so weak now. The curse had taken so much. A mercenary backhanded him. Alan fell, hitting the stone floor hard.
No.
Rin kicked and thrashed, but they held her firm. Severin walked to Alan and lifted him by the throat. The boy's legs kicked uselessly. 21 days, Severin said. And now, at midnight on the solstice, the curse completes. He dragged Alan toward a ritual circle carved into the floor near the altar. Rin hadn't noticed it before. It was covered in the same symbols from Alan's drawings. The girl goes in the circle too, Severin ordered. Her presence anchors the final phase. They dragged Rin forward and forced her to her knees inside the circle. Alan was placed beside her, his small body trembling.
I'm sorry, Rin whispered.
I'm so sorry. Alan's hand found hers. He squeezed weakly. Severin began chanting in a language that hurt to hear. The symbols on the floor glowed red. The air grew thick and hot. Varos struggled against the chains, roaring threats and curses, but he couldn't break free. The ritual had begun, and they were out of time. The symbols burned brighter. Pain lanced through Rin's body as the ritual circle activated. She could feel something pulling at her, like hooks under her skin, dragging energy from her bones. Beside her, Alan convulsed, his mouth open in a silent scream. Severin's chanting grew louder, more frenzied. The mercenaries formed a ring around them, weapons raised, ensuring no escape. Across the cathedral, Varos thrashed against the silver chains. Blood ran from where they cut into his skin, sizzling as it hit the blessed metal. It's almost complete, Severin said, breathless with anticipation. I can feel it. His shadow, his voice, his soul, all of it flowing into me. Rin looked at Alan. The boy's eyes were glazed with pain, his skin gray as ash. She could see through him now. Actually see through him, like he was fading from existence.
No, Rin gasped.
Not like this. She threw herself over Alan, covering his body with hers. The ritual circle flared. Energy that had been flowing into Severin suddenly redirected, slamming into Rin instead. It felt like being struck by lightning, white-hot agony that made her vision go white. Foolish girl. Severin snarled. You'll only die with him. Then I die. Rin screamed back. She wrapped her arms around Alan, holding him as tightly as she could. You're not taking him. Not while I'm breathing. Beneath her, she felt Alan stir. His hand pressed against her chest, over her heart. And something shifted. The pain changed. Instead of tearing her apart, it began to flow through her into Alan, then back to her, creating a circuit. The energy of the curse spun faster, caught in a loop it wasn't designed for. What are you doing? Severin's voice held panic now. Stop. But Rin couldn't stop. She didn't know what was happening, but she felt it in her blood. That dormant shadow realm ancestry Morel had mentioned. It was waking up.
Recognizing Alin. Protecting him.
Your blood remembers even if you don't. Alan's hand glowed. Then his whole body began to shine with light. Not the sickly red of the curse, but something else. gold, like dusk, like the last rays of sun before night falls. His lips moved, and for the first time in 64 days, sound emerged. Rin. One word, barely a whisper, but it shattered the ritual circle like glass. The symbols exploded outward in a blast of golden light. The mercenaries were thrown backward, slamming into pillars and walls. Severin stumbled, his chanting cut off. Alan rose to his feet, still glowing. His eyes, once dark and hollow, now burned with power. Ancient power. Royal power. His shadow returned. It didn't just appear. It erupted from beneath him like a living thing, spreading across the floor in waves of golden-edged darkness. The shadow rose, taking form, becoming weapons, blades and chains and spears made of pure darkness.
Impossible, Sovereign Breted.
The curse should have. You forgot something, Varro said. The silver chains binding him were cracking, unable to hold against the surge of power from his son. Alan is not just my heir. He's his mother's son too. Human blood mixed with vampire blood. A bridge between worlds. The chain shattered. Varos rose, bleeding but furious. And you just gave him reason to embrace both halves of his nature. Alan's shadow weapons lashed out. They moved like living serpents, faster than the mercenaries could react. They wrapped around legs, arms, throats, not killing but binding.
Holding.
One wrapped around Severin. The general struggled, but the shadow tightened. Alan walked toward him, each step echoing in the sudden silence of the cathedral. His small form cast an enormous shadow now, stretching up the walls, filling the space with darkness. Prince Alan, Severin's voice held forced calm. Think about what you're doing. I only wanted to make our people strong. 2. You hurt him. Alan's voice was still weak, still raw from disuse. But it carried absolute authority. You tried to kill me. You hurt my father. You hurt Rin. The shadow around Severin tightened. Alan, Varos approached his son carefully. You have him. The curse is broken. Let me handle this. For a moment, Rin thought Alan might not listen. The power radiating from him was immense, dangerous. He'd been voiceless and powerless for so long. Now he had both back, and the temptation for revenge must be overwhelming. Then Alan looked at Rin. She was still kneeling in the remnants of the ritual circle, exhausted, her body aching. But she managed a small nod. Don't let him make you into something you're not, she said softly. Alan's glow dimmed slightly. The shadows around Severin loosened just enough that the general could breathe. Bind him, Alan commanded.
His voice was stronger now.
He will face trial in the Shadowlands. For treason. For attempting to murder the crown prince. The shadows obeyed, wrapping Severin in unbreakable chains of darkness. Varos knelt beside his son, and Rin saw tears in the vampire king's eyes. You spoke. You found your voice. Rin helped me remember it, Alan said. He turned to her, and his expression was pure joy. She kept her promise. She didn't leave me. Rin felt tears streaming down her own face. Never again, kid. I promise. Across the cathedral, the mercenaries who hadn't fled were surrendering. The ritual circle was dark and dead. The curse was broken. Alan's shadow stretched naturally beside him, solid, whole, perfectly aligned with Rin's in the moonlight. For the first time in months, Prince Alan cast a shadow. And he was no longer silent. The mercenaries didn't go quietly. Kill the prince, one shouted, raising his runic weapon. Severin promised us. Varos moved like liquid death. His sword, dark metal that drank the moonlight, sang through the air. The mercenary's weapon clattered to the floor, followed by its owner. Anyone else? Varos's voice was cold as winter. Anyone else wish to challenge the crown? The remaining mercenaries dropped their weapons. But the cathedral doors burst open. More figures poured in. Not mercenaries this time. These wore the formal armor of the Shadow Guard, the king's elite soldiers. At their head was a woman with white hair and scars crossing her bronze face. Stand down, she commanded. In the name of King Varos. She stopped, taking in the scene. Severin bound in shadow chains. The vampire king bleeding but standing. Prince Alan glowing with power. Captain Lysandra, Varos said. You're late. We came as soon as we received word of Severin's betrayal, my king. One of his own lieutenants turned on him. Lysandra's hand went to her sword hilt as she stared at Severin. Is it true? You orchestrated the curse. He confessed, Varos said flatly. Before witnesses. He intended to steal Alan's shadow-walking abilities and claim the throne. Lysandra's expression hardened. Then the punishment is clear.
Death.
Immediate execution. No, Alan's voice, still weak but growing stronger, rang out. Not immediate. Everyone turned to the small prince. He stood in the center of the shattered ritual circle, shadows still swirling at his feet, looking far older than his 6 years. He will stand trial, Alan continued. In front of the shadow court. Every noble, every clan leader, will hear what he's done. They'll see him bound and broken. They'll know that betraying House Nyx brings no power, only ruin. Lysandra bowed her head. Wise words, Prince Alan. Your mother would be proud. At the mention of his mother, Alan's glow dimmed slightly. Rin saw the child beneath the power again, still hurting, still grieving. My king, one of the guards called from near the mercenaries. This one's trying to run. They dragged forward a man in dark tactical gear. Unlike the others who'd surrendered, this one's eyes still glowed gold with defiance. I recognize him, Rin said, stepping forward despite her exhaustion. He was at my apartment. He tried to kill us. A hunter, Varos said with disgust. Severin hired human hunters. How far you fell, old friend. Friend. Severin laughed. A bitter, broken sound. I was never your friend, Varos. I was a tool you used. Loyal Severin, faithful Severin, 200 years watching you and your family take everything that should have been mine. You were given honor, position, respect. I was given scraps. Severin's composure cracked. I fought in the Portal Wars. I bled for the Shadowlands. And what did I get? The privilege of serving a half-human child who can't even properly control his powers.
Aline Flynn kid.
That's enough, Rin said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. She moved to stand beside Alan, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. You can justify it however you want, but you tortured a child. You stole his voice, his shadow. You tried to erase him from existence.
He's weak.
The Shadowlands need strength. He broke your curse through sheer will and love, Rin interrupted. He remembered a childhood friend across years and realms and memory alterations. He protected me tonight, even though he was dying. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. You're not even a fraction of the person he is. Silence fell over the cathedral. Then Lysandra drew her sword. Lord Severin, by the authority of House Nyx and the Shadow Guard, I place you under arrest for high treason, attempted regicide, and conspiracy to overthrow the crown. You will be transported to the Shadow Hold to await trial. And the mercenaries? Another guard asked. The supernatural ones go to the hold. The humans, Varos looked at the hunters with barely contained rage. The humans will have their memories altered and be returned to their world. Let them live with fragments of nightmares they can't quite remember. The guards moved efficiently, binding prisoners with shadow-forged chains that couldn't be broken. Severin fought until the end, screaming threats and promises of revenge, until a guard gagged him with darkness. As they dragged him away, he locked eyes with Alan one final time. The hatred there was absolute. Alan didn't look away. He watched until Severin disappeared through the cathedral doors. It's over, Varos said quietly, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. He can't hurt you anymore. He hurt a lot of people, Alan replied. His voice was sad. How many others did he recruit? How many still believe like he does, that I'm too weak to lead? Then you'll prove them wrong. Varos knelt to meet his son's eyes. Not today. Not tomorrow. But in time. You'll show them what strength really means. Lysandra approached, bowing to both king and prince. The shadow hold is secure, my king. The nobles are already gathering for an emergency session of the court. They want to see Prince Alan. To know he lives. Then we return home, Varro said. He looked at Rin. All of us. Rin blinked. Me? You saved my son. You broke an impossible curse through nothing but love and loyalty. Varros's expression softened. The first time she'd seen anything like kindness in his ancient face. You belong with us now. If you'll accept. Alan grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. His eyes pleaded. Rin looked around the ruined cathedral. Hours ago, she'd been prepared to die here. Now she stood among vampires and shadow guards, being invited to another realm. It was insane. It was impossible. Yes, she said. I accept. Alan's face lit up with pure joy. Outside, dawn was approaching. The sky had begun to lighten at the edges. They didn't go directly to the Shadowlands. First, Varros brought them to a place Rin had never imagined existed, a bridge between worlds. It stood in a clearing 20 miles outside New Corn City, hidden by the same perception filters as the night market. But this wasn't a disguised alley. This was something ancient and powerful. Two massive stone pillars rose from the earth, covered in symbols that glowed with soft silver light. Between them, the air shimmered, not with heat, but with possibility. Through the shimmer, Rin could see another sky. Purple clouds. 3 moons hanging low on the horizon. The old gates were destroyed in the war, Varros explained. But after tonight, after what Alan accomplished, the elders have agreed to open one permanent bridge. Controlled, monitored, but open. Why? Rin asked. Because isolation breeds fear. Fear breeds hatred. And hatred, Varros looked at the shadows where Severin had been dragged away hours before. Hatred breeds betrayal. The Shadowlands cannot hide forever. And the human world deserves to know we exist. Captain Lysandra stood at attention beside the portal. The Shadow Court is assembled, my king. They await your arrival. Let them wait a moment longer. Varros turned to Alan. Your choice, my son. We can go through now, face the court, begin the trials and the politics. Or we can wait. Let you rest. Recover. Alan shook his head. No more waiting. No more hiding. His voice was still rough, but growing stronger with each word. If I'm going to be their prince, they need to see I'm not afraid. Pride flickered across Varros's face. You are your mother's son. I'm both their son, Alan said quietly. He looked at Rin. And Rin's friend. All of those things together. Rin knelt beside him. Dawn light was breaking over the hills, painting everything gold. You know you don't have to prove anything to anyone, right? You're already the bravest person I've ever met. I know. But I want to do this, Alan smiled. A real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Besides, I want to show you the palace gardens. The purple flowers are blooming. Something in Rin's chest cracked open. That ghost memory became solid, real. She remembered. Not everything, but enough. Running through gardens, hiding behind fountains, drawing symbols on stone paths with colored chalk while a small boy with a crown of leaves laughed. I remember those flowers, she whispered. You used to make crowns from them. You used to pretend they were magic wands, Alan's eyes shone. You said if we wished hard enough, we'd never have to say goodbye. And then we did anyway. But we found each other again. Alan took her hand. Like you promised we would. Lysandra cleared her throat. My prince. The court truly is waiting.
Right.
Sorry, Alan straightened, trying to look princely. The effect was somewhat diminished by the fact that his hoodie was torn and he barely came up to Rin's waist. They approached the portal together, Varros, Alan, and Rin. Wait, Rin said. What about my life here? My apartment? Marcus is going to wonder where I disappeared to. We've arranged cover stories, Lysandra said. As far as your employer knows, you've won a scholarship to study abroad. Your apartment will be maintained. You can return to the human world whenever you wish. The bridge remains open. You had this all planned. Varros smiled slightly. I had hoped it would end well. A hope required contingencies. Alan tugged Rin's hand. Ready. She looked back at the human world, at the rising sun, at the distant city skyline, at everything familiar and safe and small. Then she looked at the portal, at the purple sky beyond, at the adventure and impossibility waiting. Yeah, Rin said. I'm ready. They stepped through together. The sensation was like walking through a waterfall made of starlight. Cool and electric and infinite. For a moment, Rin existed in both worlds simultaneously, seeing the clearing and the purple sky, feeling earth and something else beneath her feet. Then they were through. The Shadowlands spread before them, a realm of eternal twilight, where the sky shifted between deep blue and purple, where 3 moons hung always visible, where flowers glowed with inner light and castles rose from mountains that touched the stars. Welcome home, Varos said softly. Alan squeezed Rin's hand and pointed to the palace in the distance, white stone towers with silver banners catching the eternal dusklight. That's home. Our home. If you want it to be. Rin looked at the boy beside her. At Varos standing proud despite his wounds. At the shadow guards assembled to welcome their prince. At a world she'd forgotten but somehow always known. The sun, the human sun, was rising behind them, its light streaming through the portal. It caught Alan as he stood at the threshold between worlds. And his shadow fell naturally, solid and whole, stretching across the glowing ground of the Shadowlands. Right beside it, perfectly aligned, was Rin's shadow. 2 silhouettes side by side, just like when they were children playing in gardens they'd both forgotten. Yeah, Rin said, smiling through tears. I wanted to be home. Alan grinned, pure joy, no more silence, no more fear, and pulled her toward the palace. Come on, I have 7 years of palace secrets to show you. As they ran together toward the white towers, Varos watched with something that might have been peace. His son was safe. The curse was broken. And the bridge between worlds stood open. Behind them, the portal shimmered with light from 2 worlds meeting. And in the Shadowlands palace, nobles and guards and citizens gathered to welcome home their prince, the boy who'd lost everything and found his voice again. The boy who cast a shadow once more.